Hello and welcome to the Hard Questions. I'm Hon Ssemujju Nganda. On this episode, we focus on the budget that Parliament passed, about 52.7 trillion shillings. It was, of course, passed amidst a lot of protests from opposition members who spoke loud about the budget being out of touch with reality, quote unquote. We speak with the Honorable Ssemujju Nganda, Member of Parliament for Chira Municipality. He's also a member of the Budget Committee, to take us into a deep dive of this budget so that you understand it better. The budget will be unveiled to the country on the 15th of June, later on takes effect on the 1st of July. Let's get right into it. Honorable Ssemujju Nganda, thank you so much for accepting to be on the show today.
Thank you.
Great. So the budget, 52.7 trillion shillings, about 20 going into statutory expenditure, about 3.8 going into the Ministry of Defense, 2.4 going into the Uganda National Roads Authority. Let me just first of all get your overall thought on the budget that you passed recently.
First of all, a budget is a budget. I asked a friend who did economics, and he told me, because I had a draft budget for my wedding, and he told me a budget, the word budget means a draft. So you don't have to put a draft budget. The budget for Uganda, it's a projection. It's what the government intends to do and next financial year. They may or they may not get the money. You can start with Uganda Revenue Authority. The projection is that Uganda Revenue Authority will collect revenue of up to 29 point something trillion, which will fund half the budget. But last financial year, the correction was 17 trillion. So they may not get the money to fund. We, in Parliament, we receive many documents from Minister of Finance, including a document on budget performance. Sometimes they can give you 100 billion shillings, it is allocated to you, and they release 20. So the performance is 20%. So the figures are, the intention is to throw them in people's faces to excite them, but they mean nothing. This budget of 52 trillion shilling, half of it is to pay debts, because we owe money to international lenders, we owe money to the domestic market commercial bank. That's where we borrow most of our money to finance. The one area where you need to give Mr. Museveni credit is that he has never defaulted on paying people's salaries. He can delay a bit, but he will always go and pick money from Stanbic and pay. That's why all the protests in Uganda are not about payment, they are about increment. So that area, I think whoever taught him to deal with the civil servant that way must get a credit. So every year we borrow money to keep paying. The due date falls and there is no money to pay. So they run to banks and pay. In this budget, we have finished. Next financial year, interest alone for the domestic debt is going to be domestic debt, money we picked from a commercial bank.
Yeah.
We also have money we have picked from international lenders, the Chinese. We are going to be paying 2.8 trillion shilling foreign debt. But you need also to understand that we don't have money to meet last year's obligation, the money we borrowed last year. So what happens is that government goes to commercial banks to borrow. If we owe banks and the principal has fallen, it is due, it is 6 trillion, they can go and borrow 10, pay the 6 that is due, and then use the 4 to continue paying. In the books that they keep throwing in Parliament, they call it treasury operations, debt all over. They just use economics words to frighten people. But otherwise, what they call statutory obligations in the budget is now nearly half the budget itself. You put that aside. You have salaries to pay. You have money for operations. That comes to almost about another 17 trillion. What remains that they call discretionary, the amount of money that you can say, this year I'm going to do a road in Kasangati, in Chireka, in Mukono, is less than 10 trillion. We even disagreed with their calculations. Because you see, if you are not attentive with the budget,
yeah,
they will put budget for the current, which means salary, and put another component, it's involvement. And involvement means buying a vehicle. So a casual looker will actually think that this budget is very good, the figures have grown, yet the figures speak to nothing. So that's the budget of next financial year. You have money for salaries, for fuel, for buying newspapers, for travel, for this and that, and then you have money to pay for debt. The total of that comes to more than 40 trillion shilling. So your 52 trillion budget, you will remain with less than 10 trillion shilling to allocate to government department to do some work.
My goodness. And part of that is shrouded in statutory expenditure.
Yeah,
and I remember Mwanga Chivumbi, the Honorable, tried to say that itemize what you actually mean by this.
Exactly. So you see, the for example, Parliament, Judiciary, and some other government departments, their budget is also like a loan. The Ugandan Constitution calls it that you are supposed to meet the parliamentary budget. In fact, the president under the law can only make comments. The same applies to the judiciary. By our constitution, they should make a budget and the president makes comment and it becomes an obligation. That's why you will see Parliament doesn't suffer like other government agencies because of the constitutional requirement. So when you total all the obligations that are being classified as statutory, very little remains to grow the country. Very little remains to go into production. Even the roads that we are talking about, what the country does not ask itself, how many new roads are going to be covered by that money? I haven't looked at the list, but I am aware they are ongoing contracts. So you may have money just to continue paying those who are doing roads. This year they're supposed to be compensating people for Kasokoso in my constituency and other areas where the southern bypass will pass. You can do that road for the next 10 years. And then each year there is money. So people think there is new money to do new roads, when actually all the money, and it's not even enough to cover the ongoing contracts. So at the end of the day, you can have a budget that actually that will not finance anything new apart from meeting the obligations.
Yeah, thank you for breaking that down. You know, when you're budgeting, I'm sure we all have homes, so we know how much we're actually going to be spending, projecting on what we spent last month. So we say, you know, basing on this, I'll need 1 sack of posho, 1 sack of rice, and this amount. Let's get to the breakdown of, you allocated about 3.8 trillion shillings to the Ministry of Defense. And every financial year, the Defense Ministry gets the lion's share.
Yes, the Ministry of Defense, last financial year, this year that we are concluding in June, had 3 trillion shilling for classified expenditure. Money that me as a representative, I don't know what they use it for. Because I kept quarreling, even in Parliament itself. In this century, there are no longer classified equipment, classified procurement. They don't. Americans, the British, the French, the Germans, when they are going to give Ukraine hardware, military hardware, they will even list. We are now sending FZ-20. So these are the aircrafts that we are sending. So I keep asking these fellows, what classified procurement are you doing when these military hardware are sold at an international market? I can assure you, Uganda knows which hardware Rwanda has. Rwanda knows which hardware Uganda, because they are sold like clothes. It is only countries that manufacture these hardware that can hide some equipment. But in Uganda here, everything you buy, you are buying from international market. There is even a magazine on military hardware. You can go and read about all the African countries, the army, the equipment. But it's a cover. Genuinely, part of the defense budget is to pay salaries. There are also procurement, not many that you may not want to publicize. But the bulk of the money in defense, and that's why I don't know of any general in Kampala here who is not constructing apartments. I don't know of any general here who is not rich. When they die, they tell you he had a farm. He now needs a helicopter to begin touring his farm. What do they do in the military that give them lots of money? So the most abused budget is the one, the allocation is the one of defense, because it is shrouded in secrecy. This is classified. There is one equipment classified expenditure that we have made of more than 12 trillion shilling. We were told it was a multi-year program that will keep putting their money. When we queried it this year, now they shifted it and put it under another item, which means this money all along has been around. So yes, defense takes a lot of money. We all want to secure our country, we want to secure our borders, but not all that money they take is for that purpose.
But let's go to, does there come a time when they declassify it so that maybe after 10 years, you declassify it and people can actually take a deep dive into it?
There is a committee in Parliament. The law says classified expenditure can be audited by the Auditor General and submitted to Parliament. The committee that we have that looks at the classified expenditure has the Speaker and the Chairman of the Budget Committee, or NRM. They will never tell you what it is. Even if they don't look at it, they will say they have looked at it. So the nature of our law gives a lot of protection to abuses. And that's why that classified expenditure goes. In fact, in this budget of this financial year, the one that we have just passed, there was an item under vote 167, which is the Ministry of Science and Technology, 37 billion shilling, and it was meant for coffee value chain. When we queried it, because it appeared under what they call transfer to private entities, there are codes there in the budget. When we queried it, that why are you transferring public money to private entities? They now came and picked it and said it is put it under State House classified. But we met during the consideration of the revenue and estimates when you entered it as a budget committee. People who met us included a son-in-law to the president, Mr. Odrick Wawog. His presentation was, by the way, very good. He said with a group of businessmen he came with that they want to improve, they want to put value to Uganda's copy and export, and then he explained the figures that are involved. Very impressive presentation, but the point is that how we want to run the country, that private people can be led by a son-in-law, give an explanation, and under a code called transfer to private entity, you give them money. Kenya, because of their flour and I think vegetables, are constructing at Ithro a very big hardware that will be refrigerated to facilitate the export of Kenyan perishables. We asked the government, why don't you do the same? Why do we give it to private individuals? The same way we gave Sudiri Pereira 100 billion shilling that is constructing a conference center because Uganda is going to host a meeting of an unaligned movement. So they say, yes, good. Why don't you construct it? That's what Idi Amin did when you're going to host AU. At that time, it was called Organization of African Countries. Conference center was constructed together with Nairi Hotel. Public facilities. So in this budget, a lot is hidden under classified, under defense. This year, next financial year, the budget we passed, there is classified expenditure of 120 billion under State House, a residence of the president. There is another classified under President's office. So classified is usually to shield you from disturbing them. Even in defense, it's the same thing. So when you subtract the money for salaries, soldiers, and operations, the rest of the money can be used to grow the country, but it will never.
And you never know what is in there.
I have told you, the Speaker of Parliament, the Honorable Anita Among, and the Chairperson of the Budget Committee, Honorable Isiagi Patrick, are the only ones in Parliament that look at the classified expenditure audited by the Auditor General. I have never looked at it, so I don't know what they spend on.
And this information never comes through?
It will not, because it is secret. So that's why they are choosing people who will not come to tell Parliament, although they do it on behalf of Parliament.
Do you think that this needs to change?
Certainly, when you are spending public resources of a poor country, you see, when people are talking about taxes, sometimes they don't know, they don't put a human face to the taxes. People who operate shops in Chikubo, over Kampala, including in my constituencies, smaller, because they're under the Public Finance and Management Act, under the income tax. People who operate these small shops are required under the law today to file returns. You pick a notebook and begin recording your sales. At the end of the financial year, you're supposed to total and pay taxes. You simply cannot pick money from everybody, including the poorest who can't sustain their children in school. And then you begin using it that way. the people who give you money, the 17 trillion last year, the 29 trillion they're talking about next year, you owe them an explanation what their money has done, what their money has done to improve their lives. It is not money to put in your pocket. It is their money collectively to improve their lives. For us, that's the point we are making to government. This is not your money. Even when you borrow on their behalf. You've borrowed their money. Please use it to improve their lives. And that's why the Constitution is very categorical. If you read the Constitution, I think Article 103, 105, 109, that Constitution assigns the President a responsibility of working for one purpose, promoting the welfare of citizens. That's why the Constitution says, not promote your welfare. Then I put it in my minority report. The work of the President is to promote the welfare of. That's why you got to collect money from them, including the poor. If you don't do it, it's a betrayal.
So they need to account to the people.
They are the ones who have given you money. You have a duty to account to them, amount that you received and what you spent it on. So you cannot begin classifying it and hiding it. Yes, classifying money, every government will do it, but it must be for the right and legitimate purpose, not to hide it for individuals to access it.
Yeah, and you talked about your minority report. I listened closely. You queried the allocation of about 417 billion allocated to State House. You put up a fight on the floor saying that, you know, some of the budgetary allocations under that vote need to be reallocated to the health sector and to other priority sectors.
You see, and my colleagues will be angry with me, but the majority of MPs do not read. When you are budgeting for the president, you need to look at the Presidential Emoluments and Benefits Act 1998. The salary of the president under the law is 3.6 million. But there is also a whole list of his benefits together with his family. For example, the president is entitled to go out for holiday once a year. His children are also entitled. The only difference is that the president flies first class and they are flying economy. And they can also, by the way, on that trip that they're entitled 1 year, they can fly a presidential jet and go for holiday. That is in the law. So the entitlement of the president are listed. All that I was telling Parliament is that, please, the law does not allow you to give him more or less. But if you look at his budget, the provisions that are there, don't just approve a list. Look at the law that the law say. The law says, first column, which is first schedule under that law, you give the president a salary, 3.6. Second schedule, you are supposed to give the president, the second column, you're supposed to give a state house. And I told Parliament, but we're operating it too. The president has Nakasero and Entebbe, which is illegal. The law, it's statutory. The law says a state house and furnished. So that's why I went into the details. And the details are provided by Minister of Finance in a big volume called the Revenue and Estimates, item by item, on which money is going to be spent. I said, look at it. You are going to give President 137 billion shilling for donation. 137 billion donation. 120 billion for classified. You're going to give him 7 billion shilling for agriculture supply. I don't know which sort of supplies are there. Give him another 184 million shilling for veterinary supplies, which, because State House is supposed to be for the president and his family, but we also have money for veterinary. So I asked Parliament, have we scrutinized to be sure that we are not the ones funding the farms at Rwakitura and Gomba and Chisos? And then you have money to buy the president clothes and furniture, fittings. In that budget, the president has 350 million shilling, which was also provided last year. I asked Parliament, what happened to the clothes of last year? Because last year we spent 350 million. We're going to spend another 350. And sometimes by the president, you will see him in a military uniform, which is not very expensive. So I said you need to be very careful when you are putting money under the residence of the president. And that's why my proposal was, we can furnish State House, we can provide the trips as they are in the law by using 20 billion shilling, which is also, by the way, on a larger side. And then the president also has a budget in his office, 250 billion shilling. The first item there that takes the biggest amount ceremonies, 43 billion shilling. They have allocated Kampala 33 billion shilling to do the roads. And then ceremonies, 43. So I asked Parliament, which sort of country are you that you allocate 43 billion shilling for ceremonies? And then the road network, and you see it is now broken down, 33 billion. And my proposal was, remove the money for ceremonies. The president has been addressing the country during COVID without having a function. He can actually continue doing so. On independence, we can have a holiday, and then the president speaks from whether Nakasero, wherever he wants, or Kororo, and then we save the money. Because I saw Tanzania, one time I visited Tanzania, what Magufuli did on Independence Day, he said we don't need to spend this money. I'll make an address, broadcast, and then the money go to do, there was a road that was very bad in Dar es Salaam. We are a poor country. We are borrowing right and left. We cannot afford to be extravagant. But you can read. And all the other, because I was just using the presidents as the illustration. You go to the ministers. Each one has money for fuel, has money, some to buy cars, others like the NRM whip. He has 800 million shilling for donation under his office. And go out and look at the prime minister. So really, this government is very wasteful, and no wonder now they are very angry with me, because they are used to bringing documents, throw at the MPs, they don't read, and then they just pass figures the way they are.
You talked about 120 billion shillings for donation.
137 is for donation. 120 classified expenditure, all under the residence of the president.
What goes under donation? What the president just gives
at functions.
Says
he does like this, and the guards are bringing brown envelopes. In fact, my recommendation, because the president wrote to us on 3rd April, he wrote to Nabanyi, and he said the people who are taken Mabati under the NRA code, that is subversive, cheap popularity, to give because you want people to love you. He called it cheap popularity. My proposal in the minority was that RO 001, Yoweri Museveni, must be court-martialed for also engaging in cheap propriety, which under the NRA code is called subversion. I made that recommendation basing on the letter he wrote to Nabanja and circulated to all MPs. I have my copy. President discourages cheap propriety going to give money. And that's why he said these Mabati ministers, he will take political action. My suggestion was that he begins with himself.
And you suggested that that money should be scrapped off and allocated to more priority sectors. Look, like the ministry, like health and education.
You've seen health. Morago, which is the face of Uganda's medical care, has not been completed. There's no money to complete the renovation. Because they have not built a reservoir. At midday, there is no water on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th floor. Toilets are closed. People are told to go down. Morago has about 6 lifts. Only one is working. We were given an MRI machine. Unfortunately, they put it in a room that is not ventilated. It is now broken down. We need to construct. And my proposal was that, please, instead of financing luxuries at State House and in President's office and in other government departments, why don't we start with things that are going to affect the lives of Ugandans? Go and repair, complete the repairs in Morago, do the roads in Kampala. For God's sake, if we get a lot more money, our presidents can afford to have money for giving out. He can afford money because there is also a budget for special meals and drinks under State House and almost in all government departments. So, and our president is not poor. He's a businessman who has farms and he sells cows, even has a salary. The wife also has a salary. The children are also employed, they are salary earners. So until we've dealt with that, the monetization of the economy, which is the theme for next financial year's budget, is going to be a theory. There will be no resources to monetize the economy. Because look at the little that goes in agriculture, less than 1 trillion shilling. That's the money for all Ugandans. Look at the money that goes in tourism, which apart from minerals is our second biggest foreign exchange earner. How much money is put there? By now, Uganda should be having airports in Kasese, should be having airports in Apache for the tourists who come here. Rwanda gets a lot of money from tourism just because people who run at Kanombe Airport, the next 40 minutes they have started watching the gorillas. In Uganda, a tourist will land at Entebbe and then for the next 8 hours is going to win. Why don't you facilitate the tourists who are bringing you money? That was my argument when we are making a response to the budget. Unfortunately, the NRM MPs, I even asked the speaker, why are NRM MPs acting like a voting machine? They had started voting even before the question was put. Yeah. He said, please. And I walked away. I said, I can't be party to this wedding. So that you begin voting even for items that have not been read. So that's how the budget is done in Uganda.
But what does that speak to that parliament?
I have said, at the risk of attracting problems from my colleagues, first, the size is too big, 539. But I think more than 50% of people who came to parliament, they came to earn. They don't care. That's why I can tell you the MPs were seeing that document of the budget for the first time. Yet they are brought there for everybody to read. So the quality, I think the late Speaker Olanya spoke about the quality of MPs. So you blame both the MPs, but also you blame the electorate that will keep sending people just because they attend the funerals, attend the burials. That's what you get. I just imagine if all of us had read these documents and we stopped the luxury at State House, stopped the luxury in President's office, stopped the luxury at Prime Minister, and in all cabinet, there will be money for you, money for irrigation, there will be money for water, there will be at least some money for roads. But unfortunately, these are the MPs that you send. You must pay the price as well.
Yeah, because I mean, I even with your guidance, on the floor, I would expect that the speaker perhaps would, interrogate more. I just heard him saying, well, this allocation is not made to the person of the president, but to the office. And therefore, after that, put the question.
You see, the speaker, when it comes to President Museveni, his office and the State House, she forgets that she's even a Speaker of Parliament. And I'm sorry to say this. I think she thinks she has a personal obligation to make sure that all that State House has asked will go unchecked. And you saw the way they were interrupting me, including the speaker. I kept complaining. You're not allowing me to read the figures that are provided by finance. These are not my figure. All I did was to break them down. But the speaker is very protective of State House. She's very protective of the president. And that's why a debate there is very difficult. I try to maneuver sometimes, but when they get you order, procedure order,
stick to the paper.
Yes, if you don't
insist, explain
you
more.
may not even read it. Unfortunately.
It's you. Thanks for speaking to the budget. You also raised an issue that the office of the chief whip. You said that office of the chief whip, they are allocating an NRM chief whip, allocating a significant amount of money that goes to the NRM chief whip, and that is not given to the opposition chief whip, and all the details, and you talked about double budgeting.
I am the whip of FDC. We are 31 MPs in that parliament. The chief opposition whip from NUB, there are 57. There is UPC, there is DP. Budget, unfortunately, parliament budgets for the government whip, because the whip is created by the Administration of Parliament Act and the rules of procedure. So that office is an office of parliament. So I wanted parliament to know that while you are budgeting for the NRM whip, who is a creation of the Administration of Parliament Act, government is also budgeting for him. He has money, 800 million shillings for donation annually. He has money.
The government chief whip.
Yes, 350 million shilling allowances for his guards. He has money, 100 million shilling to buy fuel. So the budget that I looked at, and that's not the whole of the budget, was 2.4 billion shilling. And my complaint was, if you must facilitate that you created the EU Parliament, either you facilitate every office or you don't facilitate any. But also for him, how can you be facilitating this office under parliamentary commission and is also facilitated
under the office of the Prime Minister?
And the speaker said, it called finance that they are going to
look into it. Yes. But you passed the budget after that.
We did, and I am going to remind them. Now I will just photocopy the document from finance for them not to think it is my creation. They need to look at the budget, and I'm doing that. I'm going to be writing about each and these items to Parliament. In the future, by the way, I intend to go to court. This cannot be allowed to continue. I intend to go to court over the State House budget, President's office, but also whip and other government officials who are benefiting at the expense of the common ordinary man who pays the tax.
Do you feel like you sometimes fight alone?
No.
Do you, okay, like even with your team, do you, because you really raised these issues and it looked like members I was watching that very closely, and I thought that members from either section would listen to what you're saying and perhaps stand up for some of the issues. It may not be all of them, but on some of the issues that you raised, because it was evidence. You're speaking numbers, reading from, the Minister of Finance report. I thought that members of Parliament in that house would have said, okay, can we amend this?
I even proposed amendments because the budget is a law, the appropriation bill. I proposed, because there was also the problem of Prime Minister and all the deputies having participated in what Museveni calls stealing of iron sheets for Karamoja. I said you can't, if they failed to coordinate and implement distribution of Mawati and goods of 39 billion shilling, how do you now hand over a budget of 222 billion shilling? And I said we should go by the same standards, because each financial year the Secretary to the Treasury will appoint an accounting officer. You are not appointed accounting officer when you have queries in the report of the Auditor General. They don't appoint you. They don't sack you, but you remain there. And I said you need to apply the same standards. If you are a minister and you have issues of accountability, please don't come near our money until your issues have been sorted. But the MPs were not listening.
The Speaker overruled you and said it's the office, not the person.
Yeah, but these offices are not the building and the chair and the computer. In fact, for me, the person is the office. Because the Prime Minister is not the office. They even close it and go home. Does it continue working when they have gone home? But unfortunately, they will not listen. All of the Speaker is going to be very protective. The NRM MPs will vote the way they are instructed. And then, because they are the majority, but we will continue speaking. Maybe in the future, and that's why I told Parliament in my report, that these figures that you are passing today, one day you can be called to account. You can be arrested for breaking the law. And you are just laughing. Because if you break the law during the process of appropriation, you can be called to account individually or collectively as an institution.
Let's talk about the source of the money. We've talked about how people are going to spend it with the bare minimum, but source of money is very important. And 29 trillion shillings is going to come from projected from URA, tax collection from the people. Do you think that we're able to raise money from the taxpayers to meet that target of 29 to actually facilitate the budget?
You see, the URA will move hard on every business, even close some. But the economy at the moment is not working well. In fact, for me, I think this is our worst. The reason they projected 29 is because they wanted to show that the economy has grown. In fact, we can still go and borrow. But if we are a country that want to live within its means, we should even have reduced the budget from 48 trillion of last year to about 30 that we can finance. Then you don't have to go to the same commercial banks and borrow. And then maybe for the next 3 years, if you don't pick money, instead of paying 6.1 trillion shilling interest, it will reduce maybe to 1 trillion. And then in the future, maybe when you have money for oil, when you have money for minerals, you can raise the budget to realistic figures. By the moment, URA, I have told you last financial year, the correction was 17. Even the performance now hasn't drastically improved. So this was just a gimmick that you present a very big figure. When the president is reading the budget, he will be speaking about an economy that is growing because the figures show. When actually they will not be able to correct that money next financial year, and they know it.
External borrowing, they said they're not borrowing. Our debt to GDP has actually, I read the IMF report some time back and there were worries, and the World Bank report, that we had crossed the red line of 50%. Our debt to GDP, last time I checked, it was about what, 80 trillion.
Yeah.
And we are going to also, well, I heard that we are not on the floor, The finance team was saying they're not going to go into external borrowing, but rather they will focus on internal borrowing and actually look for more funding.
See, external borrowing is cheaper because the money that you get from IMF and by the way, including China, China will lend you money at a commercial rate maybe of 4 or 5%. The money that you pick from commercial banks here is at 18%. You will be stupid to say, no, we have reduced on external funding, external borrowing. Now we are going to borrow domestically, and you ask people to be excited. The reason where money to be borrowed from outside is reducing is because you needed to have looked at the tweet the Secretary to the Treasury recently tweeted when he was in Washington to meet World Bank and IMF. He said the money is no longer available if you want to borrow for climate change. And he actually said you now need to rework our policies. So even the lenders are not available. Even the budget support has reduced in this budget that we passed because we can't meet the condition. You're a country that is torturing its citizens. Europe will put condition when they are lending you money. But China, we owe it a lot of money because most of the projects in Uganda today, from the power dams to the airport to roads to etc., they're all being financed by money from China.
And there's collateral.
And China is like a money lender. If they want their money, you have to give it. That's why they even wanted to change the name of Entebbe Airport to China something in case we defaulted. So that's China. They are very strict lender. They have. But when you borrow from China, you know on due date they will be knocking at their door. Europeans even at one time forgave us the debt. They said these poor people can't pay. I don't think China will forgive you. So therefore the borrowing from external is not reducing because it is a government policy or strategy. The lenders have put condition, but they have also reduced their budget support and grants and money. So we are now squeezed. In fact, I fear that at the time of budgeting for the next financial year, our interest might be at 10% because it has been growing from 3 trillion to 4 to 5. It is now 6. And that is interest alone. You can imagine a budget of 52 trillion and one item interest is 6.1.
Before you pay the principal.
Before you pay the principal, and it keeps growing because you keep borrowing more money. So we are a country in crisis, but you are behaving like we are Saudi Arabia with a lot of resources in our hands.
And borrowing internally can also crowd out the private sector because the government of Uganda will be competing with you. So you all go to the same commercial banks to get money.
Because debt collecting is very difficult in an economy like ours. Commercial banks prefer lending to government because that money is going to be paid and it will come in lump sum. Actually, the commercial banks have become lazy because they don't have to lend to the public for them to continue making money. They just make money available for government to borrow 10 trillion. So you will continue getting a loan for whatever purpose at 18 to 19% because there is no incentive to lower the interest.
How does the future look like for the next financial year?
I had an opportunity for a debate with Mr. Seven on a radio station. And I told him, when you captured power in 1986, you remember his speeches, buying furniture from Kawempe and flying a presidential jet. I told him, at that time, Uganda was the project. Today, sir, you are the project. And that's why you will have money. Look, the budget of Makerere University for a president who is promoting science is about 130 billion shilling. For the 40,000 students and lecturers, faculty of technology, medicine, everybody. Government is going to put 130 billion shilling. The budget for donation by M7 is 137 billion shilling. So money in his pocket to keep dishing out is bigger than the budget of Makerere University for a president who wants to promote science and technology. That's how absurd the whole thing has become.
Wow. What are your fears?
The economy will continue shrinking. You will continue exporting girls to Saudi Arabia. The ambassador of Saudi Arabia paid the courtesy call to the Speaker of Parliament. We have those who I think who are registered. 200,000 girls who are maids and house girls in Saudi Arabia. They are the same numbers in all the Middle East countries because we failed to grow our economy and they are abused. And you have no quarrel to make because you are the one who has failed to grow your economy. So the population will continue being vulnerable until one day either Mr. Museveni has gone, because I don't expect that Museveni will go back to the Museveni of 1986 who wanted to buy furniture from Kawempe, who was eating on a plastic plate. We now have a president who at one time had 2 jets, a president who has a convoy. I told him when in a radio program that you can with the biggest convoy, bigger than Nigeria and South Africa, the 2 biggest economy at the continent. So until we have, and the trouble that we might run into as a country is to get another president who wants to behave like himself or even worse. Then you forget about development, the status quo will remain, will continue being poor. Every citizen will be looking and hunting for a visa to go to the nearest destination.
Wow. The Honorable Ssemujju Nganda, thank you so much for speaking to us. The Honorable Ssemujju Nganda leaves us thinking a lot about, are we getting our priorities right? Are we allocating monies to the right sector? What does it mean for you and me? And it makes us think so hard about where this country is going. I'm Hon Ssemujju Nganda, and this is The Hard Questions.